Welcome, everyone, to the Racist War and Everything. We are joined by Fenian and Knowlesy from our lovely Perth studios. And how are you feeling about the end of the parliamentary year, Knowlesy? Exciting?
Oh yeah, exciting end of the parliamentary year. Going on to the Christmas holidays. What the fuck did they do in the past week and a bit? Holy shit.
Yeah, so it was actually a pretty hectic week of Parliament. So, last week was the very last week of parliamentary sittings for 2024. I believe they resume in February. So that might make our prep that little bit lighter until then. But yeah, they went through somewhat of a legislation blitz, you could say. They had a guillotine motion. And a guillotine motion is basically where you streamline government bills through both houses. Usually, there's hours set aside for debate. It'll often go to a Senate committee for analysis, that kind of stuff. But being the end of the year, and given the fact that, an election will be no later than May, which isn't really that long away, Labor really wanted to push through as much as they could, especially those that, they'd want to brag about during a campaign. They really needed to get those down so that they could brag about their record. So they didn't get everything through, obviously. There was over 30 pieces of legislation from various sectors. So social media, of course. They were not able to get through the disinformation stuff. There was some stuff on housing.
Thank fucking God.
Some stuff on immigration. Of course, definitely stuff on green energy, as there always is. And over 30 bills, like I said. So we're not obviously going to cover every last one of them, but we will try to get to the important ones. So
the ones that will finger you the most.
We'll start on the big one, which is social media. And this was actually international news because we are the first country in the world to actually put an age restriction on social media. So this will mean that, if you're a parent and, you let your child on social media, and by child I mean anyone under 16 years of age, you won't be in trouble for it. Neither will the child. The company itself, so let's say you've got a 12-year-old accessing Facebook. Facebook would be in line for a fine for having facilitated that person's account on restricted social media. Now, as you can imagine, it was the social media companies or their parent companies like Meta that were very much opposed to all of this. Obviously, it is a financial disincentive for them. And there was a lot of debate as to, how you can actually police this stuff. So the way I understand it is that it's not compulsory for there to be a digital ID. And the government has not actually, I think this is very intentional. They really haven't said anything about introducing a national digital ID that basically stores all your important personal information, not just your
coming up to an election.
Yeah, there's no way they're going to do it. Yeah, like that. I mean, like this is popular, and by the way, bipartisan support here. So this was one of the bills that they rammed through with, I think it was like 1 hour of debate. Like that's all you get with the guillotine motion. And of course, the coalition have been, at least in principle, supportive of such a ban for a good while now. I've heard them reference, teen suicide and stuff that they basically directly blame social media for. So it's not a big surprise that they push this through. However, there were members of the coalition that voted against this. So Matt Canavan from the Nationals, Alex Antic, who's the maverick Liberal from Adelaide, they voted against it. So they have. So the Liberal Richard Colbeck abstained. And if I remember correctly, the other maverick Liberal, but she's a maverick from the left, Bridget Archer from Tasmania, she voted
Yep.
against this as well. Now, about the digital ID, there's nothing that says that the social media company is going to require a digital ID from you. However, it is still up to them to perform some sort of age verification so that they know whether or not someone is allowed to come on. So if that is not in the form of a digital ID, I don't know. I mean, what else can they do? I mean, I know that crypto accounts, they'll do things like they'll get you to take a photo of yourself holding your driver's license, something like that. Sometimes they get you to like write something down on a bit of paper and hold that up like it's a mugshot or something. So if it's not a digital ID, it will still have to be something fairly intrusive, because how else are they supposed to know that you are of a certain age?
I
I don't know
mean,
if you have any alternatives,
yeah,
Northern.
so I'll concur. It will have to be very intrusive because back in the early days of Facebook, they would accept a random death certificate. There was websites where you could be like, punch in name and date and place of death, and it would give you a death certificate that looked realistic for that country. Eventually, they stopped accepting these, and you had to prove by literally showing an ID, showing your face that you were who you said you were on that account. I don't know if you've ever used Facebook between now and 2018, but if you basically get reported as having a false identity, they make you hold your driver's license and or passport right next to your face, and then have someone verify that on the other end, a human being.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I'd be fine with that. I mean, for example, when you go to buy alcohol or something, you get carded. I mean, that's obviously fair enough. But that's not a digital record. You do it on Facebook or whatever, like that then becomes a piece of data that is stored. And
Yep.
that's where privacy concerns come into play. And, while I am in support of this in principle, I just don't know about what this is going to lead to further down the track. And I mean, for one thing, I think I said this last week, what about creating anonymous accounts where you want to not give your real name or anything like that? Twitter, remember, is included, or X is included in this bill. Remember, it doesn't include everything, like YouTube, I believe, is exempt. But Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are definitely on it. They're the big three, and TikTok as well, I think. So, Twitter is definitely the most political platform of the lot. Twitter was never intended to be political, but because of its, its existence as a micro blog, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
That lended itself pretty well to people posting out nice little short bites of political rhetoric. And that's how it evolved into quite a political platform. And, what happens if a whole bunch of our guys who are on there, who have been lucky enough not to have gotten banned, all of a sudden they're getting asked, hey, can you hold your driver's license up and take a photo of yourself? And if you don't do that, well, we're banning you, we're kicking you off. That's an issue. And because of the fact that this was a guillotine motion and there was only 1 hour of debate on it, these are some of the questions that obviously would have come up and would have been probed a lot further than what they were. So we're left in this position where we're saying we don't really know what's going to happen now. All we know is that these laws have passed. that the social medias are going to have to enforce them. We have limited detail on how they're going to do that, and we have limited detail on just how, say, destructive it can be towards privacy and also anonymity on the internet.
Yes.
So
I've
means
heard that there's been an extension of an API search system, or that there's talks of extending an API search system to these companies, so they can basically use this API to reference internal government databases when it comes to
just
driving license.
explain API.
Really basic. It's just like something that a program can call on. It's a function that a program can call on that's web based. That say like, oh, I need to, this name, this face, and this driver's license number. Send to API. API returns back yes or no. It's much more complex than that, but in this case, that's what that would be. It's just a check function for them.
All right. Well, that doesn't sound so bad, if they were to go by that.
Well, it would give a yay or a nay if that identity is correct. So it would be direct confirmation.
Yeah.
Which is concerning.
We just don't know. Okay. So before we get to some of the other pieces of legislation, one last thing on social media, and that is that the government will back the ACCC's request for new powers to regulate digital platforms. So this extends far beyond social media. We're talking about the big companies like Apple and Google and all of their products. So under these powers, they're not due to come into effect till next year, though. The ACCC could designate a company requiring it to comply with a specific code of conduct, laying down rules of conduct and enforceable dispute resolution. By that, I think they just mean fines. So the ACCC would also be given new merger powers under mandatory notification, which means deals cannot proceed without ACCC approval. So in other words, mergers within, IT could not actually occur without the ACCC approving of it. Now, this comes down to, I know that anyway, Google were definitely accused of anti-competitive practices in Australia, particularly the way the Google search and the Google Chrome browser work, trying to basically restrict people from using products other than Google's. This is something that software companies are accused of doing a lot. Certainly Microsoft was accused of doing that. This is where we need Kyber on to say, I really don't know. All I did was just read that Google is being accused of these things. I don't know if they are actually engaging in that kind of behavior. I know they're a big bloody company and their products are so ubiquitous that everyone uses them. And God knows how much of their data they scrape to sell you things. But it'll be a shitload. Okay.
Yes.
So, you catch the cat fight in the Senate, Knowlesy?
Oh, God. I only just saw the resolution of it today with that fucking letter that was sent on Twitter.
Yeah, it got kind of hot and heavy, but it was... I'd say, actually, no, it was... I mean, look, it involved 3 women, but I'd say only 2 of them were feisty. I was about to say, 3 feisty women, but Pauline Hanson was actually quite tempered in amongst all of this, even if you can argue what she was doing in the motion was provocative. But look, if you don't know, this is over Fatima Payman, who was born in Afghanistan. Her family came to Australia as refugees, and she was a young child. Under Section 44 of the Constitution, you cannot serve in the federal parliament if you're a dual citizen, if you have the citizenship of any other country. And there are questions as to whether or not she holds Afghan citizenship. Now, the reason we're given as to why it's we can't figure out whether or not she's got it, is that the Taliban who were back in power at that time, were very bad at keeping records. And it's basically impossible to find out if she was a citizen, and therefore it's impossible to revoke her citizenship because, what process could you possibly go through if they don't even know you're a citizen in the first place? So I need to remind people that, yes, when she was being vetted for the Labor Party, they deemed this not to be a problem. So that, the Taliban excuse was a good enough one, she can come through. It was not Pauline Hanson, however, who first brought up her eligibility to sit in the Senate. It was the Labor Party. Pauline is simply just picking up where they left off here. Because remember, Fatima Payment is not a member of the Labor Party anymore. She went independent, and now she's got the Australia's Voice Party, which will be nothing but a green.
Yeah.
But it was then, when she left the Labor Party in, pretty spectacular form, that was when talk started to emerge that she may be ineligible and there may be some kind of challenge under Section 44 to basically boot her out of Parliament, boot her out of the Senate. And in the case of the Senate, you don't get to go to a by-election. That's the thing. It would actually go back to Labor in that case, because they're the ones who are seen to have won on that ticket. And so you would just go to whoever was next in line on the Senate pecking order for WA, because she's a WA senator. So you can imagine that's why Labor would want to do it. It means to kind of get rid of that little mess and have one of their own parachuted back into the Senate. But it was Pauline who's taken it up because, for whatever reason, the Labor Party has left that alone since then. Maybe they figured it was not worth it, or that they would be accused of being racist, because, of course, whenever you do bring this up, that's what you're accused of. Now, the most recent example, though, of all of this was Josh Frydenberg. And yes, we were told that it was anti-Semitic. And it was the conservative side of politics who were saying that.
That was screaming to high heavens. I just love that. Like, literally, it was like at the tail end of all these other like New Zealanders and etc. getting fucking absolutely like bounced out like a year and a bit before. So this was still a hot button issue, and we found out we couldn't touch this dude with a 10-foot fucking pole because he was Jewish.
Right. So, look, if you don't know, Josh Frydenberg, the former treasurer, his parents are said to be Holocaust survivors who were in Hungary at the time that World War II was going on. And after the war, Hungary made a retrospective law saying that if you lived there during the war and you weren't documented, then you automatically got Hungarian citizenship. Yep. So that naturally led some people, I forget the guy's name, but the guy who actually brought it to court was this guy who wrote a book called The Holocaust Denier. I forget his name. Interesting character, though, because he was actually a member of the Labor Party. And they went apeshit over this, right? Now, Sky News is making a lot about how hysterical Fatima Payment got, and she was a bit screaming shit out. But this is nothing compared to what they did over Josh Frydenberg. And, of course, it ended up failing in the court as well. Trevor Polton, that was his name. The guy who tried to get Frydenberg kicked out of Parliament. You can buy his Kindle edition of The Holocaust Denier for $4.55 on Amazon.
What a bargain.
Okay, so, but some of the things Fatima Payment brought up was like, damn, you're bringing up these quotes of when Pauline Hanson was actually kind of based. Like when she said we were in danger of being swamped by Asians. Or also, there was a lot of South Africans coming over here and lots of them have AIDS. That was the one she like screamed about. I'm like, yes, but it's absolutely true. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, South Africa is full of black people who have AIDS. And yes, we were letting a lot of them through. Um, and if you want to say it's racial, fine, but it is also true. It's absolutely true.
Again, that's the problem you run into immediately with 18C is that reality is unfortunately racist.
It is, but that didn't stop Pauline Hanson from making points of order each time for her and also Lydia Thorpe, who we'll get to retract the accusations of racism. They'd always just say, like, oh, look, for the sake of the chamber, you should retract that. And then they say, okay, for the sake of the chamber, I will. Which basically means they don't really retract it. Lydia Thorpe, of course, yelled out, you are a convicted racist. And this is what Pauline Hanson released a public letter about, calling on Lydia Thorpe to apologise. Now, as you also said, she was defamed. Now, in the eyes of the law, even if, 18C would see it that way, and there's a very good chance it would, especially considering the finding against Pauline Hanson for her tweet against Marine Faruqi, it doesn't matter because Lydia Thorpe said it in the Senate during question time. So, parliamentary privilege. You can say what you want. But you can get her for saying it elsewhere. So if she goes on does a TV interview and says it, then yeah, you can sue her then. I believe she has. I think it was on Sky News where she said she stands by her statement that Pauline Hanson is a convicted racist. Now, there's not really any such thing as being a convicted racist, but I assume she was referring to, the finding against her with Marine Faruqi. The fact that she was found to have violated Section 18C and racially defamed or vilified her. So we'll see how that goes. We know that Pauline seems to she takes it very personally when people call her a racist. And, I just kind of think, like, Pauline, you should stop caring. If they call you a racist, great. Because you know what? It makes headlines. And it makes people listen to what you have to say. And if you were to actually just double down on all of that and just ignore all of the accusations of racism and the name calling, people are going to respect you more for it. Just look at Donald Trump in 2016 and to a lesser extent 2024. But we know that these are just words to silence debate that too many people consider powerful. They are very, very powerful words, and people are terrified of being accused of it. However, in the long run, it doesn't really turn out to be anything that bad. Sure, you'll have media and hysterical lefties against you, but you'll have a shitload of voters on your side. So don't be so afraid of it. Now, look, one thing, though, that Lydia Thorpe could be charged with is assault. When all of this was going on, she ripped up the papers from Hanson's motion and threw them into her face. That's an assault. Okay, it may not be a serious one. That is an assault. That's a physical attack on
And
someone.
she did this while Marshall sober. That's novel.
She did what?
And she did this while sober. That's novel. In fact, now I'm questioning: has she ever been?
She might have been on an all nighter. You never know. She might have just knocked on to bed.
Oh boy, wouldn't put it past her.
Yeah, but that was when after she threw the papers, like she stormed out, flipped the bird while she was walking out, and because of that, she was banned from sitting in Parliament for the remainder of the year's sitting. So basically,
Not too long.
Yeah. So for the end of the year, she was a no-show. But yeah, I will say though that ordinarily, let's just imagine that was all men. All three of those senators were men. I don't think it. I mean, it would have been passionate. Voices would have been raised or whatever. But I don't know if it would have gotten to those kind of hysterical levels, those levels of girly drama that were brewed. I don't know. To me, it does look like one of those things where you think, I'm fine with women voting, but I don't know about them sitting in Parliament.
Women
Like
should.
Ann Coulter says, like the other way around. Like women shouldn't vote, but they should be able to allow to run for Parliament
Why?
because I guess she's saying that because she's a woman and she's a political commentator. Well, she said, and also, they should be allowed to comment on politics. But yeah, she's like, yeah, I'll gladly give up my vote.
I'll break it to you this way: we treat women like they do in the Islamic world, but you don't have to wear a hijab. Is that a good deal?
Might be. Is that your version of white Sharia?
Yeah, pretty much, man. That's where we're at right now, my nigga. Shit.
All right, so, oh wait. So actually, I have a couple of quotes here from what Lydia Thorpe said to media. So this is to the ABC and to Channel 9. She said, they are quick to punish the black woman here all the time for calling it out. But I am responding to racism, and that is what they need to focus on. It's been a horrible week, and when you're subjected to racism, I stand against it. I ripped up a piece of paper. Senator Hanson is a convicted racist. She has worn a burqa in the chamber. She baits me regularly with racial taunts. What racial taunts? Name one. Seriously, like what has she ever said that could be classified as a racial taunt in the Senate? We know that she hasn't used any because if she had, it would have been fucking front page on every paper in the country. She does not do that. She may not be the brightest bulb, but she's not dumb enough to do something like that.
Yeah. I have noticed that like over the past like year and a bit, she's been a little bit more wiser with her words and campaigning. Maybe it's because she's getting writing notes from the people who make that fucking animation for her.
Oh, that thing, yeah. Well, I don't know, man. It might just be her Jewish backers now, because yeah,
Oh
she
yeah.
used to be the enemy of Jews. Jews used to purposely dox One Nation members. Now,
Yep.
they're all cozy with each other. All right. So, one of the bills that did not get through, this was the plan to reform the laws on political donations at the federal level. Now, this is despite the fact that the coalition, again, in principle, actually supported this. Um, every other party and independent, though, did not. So that gives you a good idea of what the purpose of these laws probably was. That being that it would favour the incumbents, the major parties, at the expense of minor micro parties and independents. So, nonetheless, though, the coalition said in the end that they would vote against it. The reason why is because with the guillotine motion, they didn't think it would kind of come up to enough scrutiny. And, these laws are consequential enough that, they warrant an extended debate. So I guess that's fair enough. But I definitely would say that even if the Liberal Party is, let's say the coalition actually wins the election next year, these will probably be laws that they'll be thinking of too, because it benefits them. And they don't like the idea of bleeding off support to other right of centre dissident parties. And, not just One Nation, but there's a raft of others. And remember that the vote for minor parties and independents seems to go up every year. In the last election, it was basically the coalition got 1/3 of the vote, Labor got 1/3 of the vote, and then the rest was everyone else. Which does show, we are quite divided as a country. But yeah, it means more votes to be picked up from anyone sitting outside of like the big three parties. Okay, so misinformation bill. Okay, that was killed off the week before.
Yeah, thank fucking God.
Yeah, and look, man, it'll be back though. I really do think it'll be back, and the campaign for it has already started. So I picked up this story. I thought this was a beauty from the chair of the ABC. His name is Kim Williams. He said that ever since that bill was killed off, Australia has been flooded with misinformation and disinformation. So it's like, oh, look, we don't have to worry about those laws, these new regulations coming in. We can up the ante. It's basically what he's saying. So there's been like a tsunami of lies permeating throughout the internet. Now, he made these comments at an address to the National Press Club. And he said this: "That's why since taking the job of chair of the ABC, I have been insisting that all our journalists adhere, always, to the highest standards of objectivity and professional ethics. We do not serve causes at the ABC. We serve the truth. This is
Oh, God.
This was the chair of the fucking ABC who uttered those words. We serve the truth. That is non-negotiable. You know what? You're supposed to. The ABC's charter actually says that you're not to have any kind of political bias or run any kind of like unofficial campaigns or anything. You're meant to be completely neutral. Yet year in, year out, you violate your charter. And the government would actually be justified in cutting your funding, even entirely, because of the fact that you don't adhere to your own charter. Now, one of the reasons I'd say the ABC would be so keen on these laws is that, well, they didn't apply to them. I don't know if people remember, but there were two major sectors that would be exempt from these laws. And that was media companies, like big media companies, say like the ABC, Murdoch Press, Fairfax, etc., and government. Well, the ABC is both at the same time, right? So it wouldn't apply to them. And that means that independent news sources online, not just through social media, but other smaller outfits, would then not even be able to counter some of the bullshit that the ABC puts out there, because they've got the government doing it for them. They've got the government there actually cracking down on people who call out the ABC. And so now he's complaining about a tsunami of misinformation. Well, boo-hoo.
Damn, this is very convenient.
Okay, so, well, here's not...
Yeah, you're right. We're going to get it anyway.
Yeah, it might just be delayed. Look, the Liberal Party still said that it was misinformation to say that Jews were behind the Aboriginal voice to Parliament. If it simply meant like quashing political speech of that nature, the Liberals would be all for it. The problem is they saw a bit of overreach in the bill and, again, not enough time to actually debate it. But yeah, it'll definitely be put on the agenda again, and quite possibly by them if they win the next election. All right, so before we get on to some more of these bills that were pushed through, stuff on housing, climate, immigration, etc., we'll just touch on the topic of racism here, because I saw a great story come out from the Race Discrimination Commissioner. So, if you don't know, that particular commissioner works within the Australian Human Rights Commission, and they just put out a new report into the nature of racism in Australia. And they say that we are at a critical juncture in our fight to eradicate racism in Australia. Like these inquiries always do, they made a number of recommendations that the government should adopt. And they're claiming that if the government does adopt that plan, that in 10 years' time, the problem, the scourge of racism in Australia will be completely eradicated. That's right. They said
The
they can
scourge
actually.
of racism will be eliminated.
Yeah. Listen. And this guy's name, what the fuck? He's like some Pajit as well, this cunt.
You just replace one type of nominal racism with the other. That's it. You could say like in the early 20th century in America there was, white on black or white on colored racism, and then what was it replaced with? You could say that there was like anti-Jewish racism or anti-Semitic racism in the Arabic world, pre-fucking 1948. Now what is it replaced with? Quite readily the other way too. You could say that the white Australians were racist. Now guess who's the only group that you can actually functionally legally discriminate against in this country?
Right.
You don't get rid of it, you replace it. It's a social pressure.
Well, look, I'd go. Yeah, I get what you mean. In terms of like where the power is entrenched, yes. But simply, if you want to just define racism as of having a particular opinion about collective biological groups, or maybe even preferring your own above another, you will just never get rid of that full stop. So long as racial differences exist, people will recognize them. And even that, is seen as a form of racism, just recognizing differences. So yeah, it's impossible. You can't stamp it out no matter what you do.
Yeah, the part of your brain that turned you was adapted when you stopped becoming a cave dwelling little marmoset looking motherfucker. Yes, your pattern recognition. That is quite literally criminal in today's society.
Oh yeah, and they've even talked about dulling parts of the brain in order to stop the brain working in that way. Which is basically like the caution part of your brain. You
yes, it's to avoid predators. Pattern recognition is to avoid predators.
Yeah, so you determine where threats can come from. So yeah, I mean, if you dull someone's like sense of racism, if you want to call it that, you basically turn off like the warning signs that warn you against danger. So anyway, this guy's name, the Race Discrimination Commissioner, Giri Dharan Sivaraman. He looks hell of a lot like an Indian, so I'm assuming he is. And he made the point here that what is central to this plan to eradicate racism within 10 years is a focus on First Nations people. So he said, there can be no racial justice in this country without racial justice for First Nations peoples. Truth-telling of historical and ongoing injustices against First Nations people is essential. All right, so you see, he's trying to, this whole truth-telling pillar and treaty as well, which basically just means Gibbs. This was something that, at least at the state level, seemed to have bipartisan support. Up until very recently, even the LNP in Queensland supported all of this stuff. That was hugely derailed by the enormous no vote for the voice to Parliament. And that's why we've got people constantly re-emphasising the importance of Aborigines and their struggle, because these previously guaranteed programs are now dying. We're going to cover a bit later as to how the Queensland government is just completely moving against the truth-telling process. now because they've realised how unpopular it is. They didn't have a spine to take a real leadership position on it previously. It wasn't until they definitely knew that the public was against it that they would actually have it as a policy.
I still reel when I think about that as this grand political miscalculation on the feelings of the public on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, the more of this kind of stuff that I read, it's like, all right, the referendum cost us a shitload of money, close to $500 million, actually. So, it's very expensive. But because of the fact that we got such a resounding no vote, all sorts of things, discussions, and policies that we previously thought unthinkable started to actually come to the fore. For example, like I just mentioned the truth telling stuff, but also a lot of people were starting to question the whole bloody welcome to country thing, and also having to acknowledge past, present, and emerging generations of Aborigines after every single fucking speech that's given. Like even in the workplace, sometimes workplace meetings, even if they're
Oh
daily, they
God.
start with like, "Oh, I'd like to acknowledge the, whatever." And that I really noticed that people who were maybe afraid of discussing that stuff before would actually then come out and say, "Yeah, why can't we get rid of this stuff? All this cumbersome shit. I'm sick of, having to be welcome to my own country every day." The real discussion actually came about when the voice to Parliament was just blown the fuck out. So maybe it was worth the $500 million.
Maybe
Oh,
maybe it fucking was. I
okay.
just still have the fear in my heart that they're gonna try and do this fucking thing again.
Oh no, they're not giving up. No, that's what I'm saying. That's why you've got like the Race Discrimination Commissioner coming out and emphasising these things, because they took a beating over it and they're trying to put it all back on the agenda. All right, so the other story on racism that we have for you, Lydia Thorpe and the Green Senator Marine Faruqi have declared Parliament is guilty of whitewashing and white supremacy. And I'm reading this story from The Australian, and the Australian has to point out here that they did not explicitly mention anti-Semitism as an issue that needs to be addressed. Okay. Don't you love this DR3 stuff from The Australian?
Hmm.
Uh, and man, like, who gives a fuck? Like, in Australia, I mean, in America, what, like, they've like a Jewish population of like 2% or something. But it's just
Yeah, it's about
amazing
2% in
how
America.
our mainstream right, like the mainstream media of the conservative bent, is like just as Zionist and pro Israel, pro Jew as it is in America. It's really astonishing considering we don't have anywhere near the population of Jews that
Then
America
again, it's not the population that's the mover and shaker here, is it?
has. Right. Um, okay, so the two senators, they went and made this declaration about the Parliament kind of being collectively guilty of whitewashing and white supremacy after the censure motion that was moved against Senator Thorpe. That was not over ripping up the papers. That was over her protest against King Charles when he was over here. So Faruqi had this to say: the minute you call out racism or racist behaviour, or we try to speak our truth about what we suffer in the workplace, we are shut down. Using weasel words like harmony, it's disgraceful. I'm sorry, but there's no other way to describe it. It's harmony for the white people and racism for the people of colour. Um, I'd really
What?
like to know again, like, where are your examples? I mean, considering you did this after the censure motion of Lydia Thorpe, you're talking about a senator who sparked an enormous amount of disorder in the chamber over an event where you are not expected to do something like that. It's not like it was question time or any kind of debate. This was just a ceremonial event. Okay, anyone would have been called out for that. That was not some like stand against institutional racism. Okay, so I guess what she's saying is that like no matter how outlandish or whatever form their so-called fight against racism takes, they should be allowed to do it. You know,
Infinite license.
they should be able to protest however they like, even if it is breaking the rules of Parliament or the conventions of Parliament, and even if it's breaking the law.
Or the law. Yeah.
Right.
Well, again, they've always demanded this. The summer of 4 years ago, man, the summer of fucking 2020. They were saying like, actually, no, like you shouldn't arrest these people, and these people were fucking pardoned, even though they fucking torched a good section of the United States of America.
Yeah. Oh, wait, were you thinking of when they burnt like the front of Old Parliament House?
Oh, that too. Yeah, apparently that's permitted. That's permitted. Was anyone really arrested over that?
No, I remember we went through it at the time. It was actually they caused about $200,000 worth of damage. It wasn't a cheap cleanup bill, and no, we actually covered at the time that people were arrested for the obstruction of an emergency vehicle, which was just getting in the way of an ambulance. But in terms of people charged for arson or destruction of property or anything, it was none, or at least at that time, even though there was video footage that had the faces of the people responsible.
Trust me, if there was an EAM flag there in the mix, like everyone would have been identified. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You see, all of these people, they weren't wearing masks or anything. Their faces were on camera, and you could actually see them do things like smash up wooden chairs and throw it on the pile to make the fire bigger. You could actually see it. And in the end, like they arrested no one for arson. So yeah, I mean, they do think they should actually be able to operate in manners like that. And if you oppose it, well, you're a racist. Okay, so let's move on to immigration. We will discuss the what was passed during the guillotine motion. But first, I'd like you to consider the unfortunate case of Rosemary and Petrus Atep. So that's a mother and father who live here in Australia, and they have 4 kids, and they're from Papua New Guinea.
Oh,
and
God.
the ABC points out that the clock is ticking on their time left here in Australia. So they've been on, bridging visas, temporary visas, and all of that. They've been in immigration limbo, as they like to call it. And, well, they're about to be deported because their temporary visa is running out. But I'm going to go and predict right now this family will not be deported, and for the very simple reason that the ABC is reporting on this.
Yep. They will get they'll get their fucking they'll get a bridging visa, and then quietly they'll get their fucking PR signed, just like the fucking Tamils.
You see, this is the problem with the nature of the powers that an immigration minister has. Like, yes, they have powers to cancel visas and everything. That's great when they do it. But they also have the power to override visa decisions. They can just dole out permanent residency visas at their own discretion. They can't do citizenship, but yeah, if they want to give you a permanent work visa or something like that, yep, the minister can take unilateral power to declare that, and yeah, it's just a law. And that's exactly what happened with the Tamil family. Of course, you can't rely on Jonesy anymore because he's probably not going to see the light of day, probably ever again. But yeah, we've gone through so many of these stories. As soon as the ABC gets on this, the minister hears about it, and the minister says, I don't want to look like a heartless bastard, so yeah, I'll just give him PR. What the hell? Okay, so there was a new report put out by, who was this by? I'm sorry, can't seem to find the name of it. But anyway, this was on the exploitation of foreign workers in Australia. But I got to say, nothing new here. Oh, it was the UN, some official United Nations report. So it said it found a disturbing pattern of exploitation from employers, labour hire companies, and migration agents. Zero surprise there. These are the culprits involved in this every single time. So they tend to do things like, so they have deceptive recruitment. So this is often when they tell them that they're going to, say, work in a big city, when they actually mean a regional place in Australia. Underpayment
Then it works here in Perth.
Withholding. Yeah. Well, yeah, which is technically a regional centre. So underpayment or withholding of wages, doing things like cashback, so it's not recorded. Excessive deductions, so that's like, charging them for bond and accommodation, that kind of thing. And dangerous working conditions. And yeah, they're a lot more likely to accept those kind of conditions because, well, that's how their own workplace looked back in their own country. Many parts of Southeast Asia, they still use bamboo scaffolding, for example.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about importing people with a lowered sense of lack of house density and living standards and work health and safety. You're talking about brown slaves here, to be honest.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. And the only way you can compete with workers like that is if you actually lower your own standards to meet the description I just read out. If you're willing to work in a really, really dangerous place with awful conditions and very, very low pay, well, then maybe you'll get a job over this guy from Fiji or whatever he's fucking from. So it says the report found that some employers actively hire disengaged and undocumented workers. I love how that's become part of Australian vernacular now. It's no longer just an American phrase, undocumented workers. To take advantage of their vulnerability, resulting in further exploitation and abuse, which includes criminal and sexual exploitation. Yeah. Well, I definitely know that there's like an industry of like Asian prostitution that goes on here. This is also part of the deceptive recruitment. They'll tell them that they're over here on a particular kind of job. So these are Asian women I'm talking about, and then they're like, "Oh, actually, no, we just want you to be a hooker." That happens a lot too. And a lot of the time, that is legal because prostitution is legal in Australia. I mean, it's regulated, but it is legal. So there's some of your competition too. Asian hookers.
Asian hookers. Right. I was going to say, like, just to add to this, you know how we covered the Woolworths strike last week?
Yeah.
Even Purple, was it Purple Pingers? That fucking communist shit from over east noted the fact that the little scuffle between the scab labor and the strikers didn't look good because obviously the strikers, as we observed, were nominally white and Asian, and the scab labor that fucking was it Coles and Woolworths and Dandenong had brought in were all darker shades of brown.
Yeah, and that's very intentional because it reduces workplace solidarity.
Yes. Yeah, again, like getting rid of the self-governing races, the races that can actually put together and organize themselves.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
and
they
then
also just
replaced
lack
with
the agency to collectively organise as united labour force.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very intentional. Okay, so let's talk about the specific immigration bills that did pass Parliament. Now, surprised. Well, I don't know, maybe not. On the surface level, like some of this might actually look a little bit harsh. So, I mean, here's the way the ABC started off this article reporting on the immigration minister's new powers. It says refugees could be separated from their children and exposed to risk of persecution under a Labor proposal being rushed through Parliament, which has since passed, by the way. I'm reading this article from beforehand. Now, oh man, again, this this argument that's I swear it originated in America, where they talk about how parents who are found to have migrated illegally are deported back to Mexico or wherever, and for whatever reason the children are permitted to stay, and they're like, you're separating them like that. You're separating the children from their parents.
How many of them have found out to be trafficked?
Yeah, but also, like, I remember when Ann Coulter commented on this, she said, well, look, when the corporate criminals from, like, was it Exxon? No, Enron, sorry. When they all went to jail, did any of the left say, oh, well, you're separating parents from their children? Because most of the people who went to jail had families. It's a ridiculous idea. If you have broken the law, we don't generally take time with your children into consideration. You just get locked up because you're getting punished, or you're being deported because you have no right to be in the country. So it's a pathetic, appeal to emotion, I think, when they bring up crap like this. It's basically like, oh, look, we can overlook immigration law if there's children involved. And that's a very common sentiment as well. I mean, you remember like that Direction 99 or whatever it was, I forget now. Basically, it said that the criminal history of a migrant could be overlooked if they had family in Australia. So, like, no matter basically how violent they were, how much of a threat they posed to the Australian public, so long as they had children in Australia, they should actually have their visa. And that's exactly what the AAT was doing. They were reinstating visas that were previously cancelled for criminals, and then they were let back in the country just because they had family here or a job here.
Well, that's the thing, that they don't even see that action as a crime. They see that action as good practice for the wearing down of the concept of a border in the first place. And I'll even quote fucking Bernie Sanders on this. Open borders is a Koch brothers project.
Yeah, he won't say that anymore, but yeah.
No, he won't.
A few years back. Okay, anyway, what do these laws actually relate to? So, it's to do with that infamous High Court ruling last year that effectively said indefinite immigration detention is illegal. So this would target, as the ABC says, a small cohort of non-citizens who have no legal right to remain in Australia but cannot be deported under current laws. Now, what the government wants to do, this part of it I do not believe has been worked out yet, is they want to just be able to find a country or two where we can send these people. And, that can be Nauru, Papua New Guinea, those little tiny countries that no one gives a crap about. Those little piss-sweet countries whose annual budget is almost entirely funded by Australia. Now, naturally, I think I saw someone talking about this in the context of Papua New Guinea. And they were saying, oh, look, they effectively want to use the country as a dumping ground for people who are not good enough for Australia, but are good enough for Papua New Guinea. You know what I say to that? Yeah, you're right. It's
Yep.
true. But guess what? We're not used to having savages in our country. Well, maybe we're increasingly getting too used to it. But, traditionally, historically, in Australia, we just had to worry about Aborigines, who were a pain in the ass enough. But there was a time where we weren't just constantly importing third world pieces of shit who habitually break the law. In Papua New Guinea, that's basically your entire population, okay? You're all a bunch of fucking cannibal criminals. And you won't notice one more. So, yeah, if we can dump them over there, I say fucking fine. We pay for your bloody broadband. You got to take some of these pieces of human filth as well. It's got to be a give and take here. There's got to be some kind of trade. And if we're constantly dumping money on you, then yeah, we should be able to dump pieces of shit on you as well.
Good.
So
let them eat each other.
Yeah. So this would mean more unilateral powers given to the immigration minister, who of course is that bucket of crap Tony Burke. And then, it's just basically it's up to him. It's at his discretion as to whether or not he exercises it. There's one area where I'll say that the Liberal Party is definitely better. When Peter Dutton was exercising such powers, he actually did use them quite effectively. It was good at removing criminal elements, although it did very little to, slow down the demographic replacement, unfortunately. The bill would empower the government to impose travel bans on countries that don't accept their own citizens, force foreigners to cooperate in their own deportation, and ban prohibited items from immigration detention centres. We went through that last week. That could include mobile phones. Because, yeah, some of them do get involved in organised criminal activity. And, the tool most used to orchestrate that is the mobile phone. And that's what they were finding.
Yes.
So it's not a surprise they want to take those off.
Again, like how many times we heard of like some shot caller having some kind of like a shot caller for a gang or a motorcycle gang, just having a phone on them in prison and actually making calls.
Which happens surprisingly a lot as well. They can be quite industrious when it comes to smuggling stuff in. It's kind of amazing how they can do it. But yeah.
It's called a booty valve.
Oh, and also one of the other powers would be to impose visa monitoring conditions on detainees who were freed after that infamous High Court decision. So that means things like ankle bracelets. Now, they better be careful with that one, though, because that could mean a High Court challenge. And, there's a chance that such laws could actually be deemed unconstitutional.
Why does the foreigner have to be treated with higher regard than, the native in this case?
Yeah, I mean, we use ankle bracelets on criminals who are out on bail. Why shouldn't we be able to use them on detainees?
Especially with the immediate results with that one dude who raped grandmas in his fucking home country proceeded to rape grandmas again.
Right. But you see,
recidivism is a thing.
Human rights of these illegal immigrants, they trump the rights of native Australians. Didn't you know that, Nosey?
Kill me.
Okay.
Just fucking kill me.
Let's go to climate and energy. So what got through the landmark piece of legislation for the climate was the Future Made in Australia bill. So this is the idea that we're going to turn Australia into a green energy giant by being a manufacturing hub for green energy products. Manufacturing is never coming back to this country be it in the form of green energy technology or anything else. But, like we're told that now with Trump back in power and the tariffs he's going to impose and everything like that, that is somehow beneficial to Australia. If there isn't so much investment in green energy from other countries, well, that means all the more we can partake it. But anyway, not a surprise that this got through. The Greens definitely wanted to take it further, as they always do. But I don't think they wanted to, be seen as the enemies against the good here. So it got through in the end. So Chris Bowen, the Climate and Energy Minister, declared renewables are the only solution to the nation's energy woes. And oh man, he put the blame for volatility in the electricity grid on coal-fired power stations. Now, this comes after last week, New South Wales were asked by their Premier, Chris Minns, to not use certain electrical appliances such as dishwashers, washing machines, and pool filters. Now, why is this? Well, they were facing potential blackouts because of what was referred to as a heat wave. Now, this was actually, I think it was just 4 days over 30 degrees. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but an official heat wave is 4 days over 35 degrees, isn't it? That's the way I heard it defined once anyway. But also, that is absolutely not uncommon for Australia, for New South Wales or pretty much any other part of the country.
Okay, so specifically for the state of New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland is between 37 to 42 degrees for 3 consecutive days.
Okay, so I was off by the days, but when it comes to the temperature, it's actually
under
higher.
Yeah.
So, well, look, the way they're spinning this is, though, that this so-called heat wave occurred during the month of November, which is still spring. And they're basically saying, oh, look, it wasn't a January or February day where we have the scorches, so therefore the power grid wasn't prepared for it. Okay, but has this ever happened before? Back when we were simply reliant on coal and gas, did we ever have, at the end of November, the Premier actually telling us, hey, don't turn on your dishwasher because you might actually face a blackout? I certainly don't remember that. Why is it that all of these kind of conditions we're seeing, where we're told about grid instability or even the grid running out, this is all happening in the post-coal era that we're sadly living in at the moment. And by the way, I very rarely spruik stuff from Sky News, but at the moment there is a new documentary. You can watch it for free on the Sky News YouTube channel. It's presented by Chris Ullman. He's the guy who used to do the 7:30 report. And damn it, I'm sorry, I can't find the name of it now. But anyway, it's a documentary on renewable energy and how much it's costing Australians. And basically how it's a lie that renewables is the cheapest form of energy. The thrust of it is basically like, okay, fine, solar and wind are free, but you need to capture it and you need to store it. And it's extremely difficult to store electricity, to store power, and have it there as like a backup for the times when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. That's the thrust of it. Yeah, watch the documentary; it'll go into much more detail. So, yeah, I recommend it.
Functionally, the total cradle to grave of a renewable is never considered. In the say like the maximum 20-year lifespan of say like a wind farm, producing 5 to 6 megawatts, they don't make back the petroleum used to even build them in the first place.
Yeah. Oh, it's called The Real Cost of Net Zero, The Shocking Truth of the Renewable Energy Push. Yeah, so you watch it, they'll really kind of break down the numbers. It was a good watch. But also, what I find funny is that lately, we're now coming to the end of the Albanese government's first term, which means 3 years. We were told that at the end of the 3 years, that electricity bills would go down by $275 a year. So when Chris Bowen was on Sky News recently, and he was pulled up on this, he mentioned the fact that the federal government is giving a $75 rebate. Now, in typical Sky News style, they reminded Chris Bowen that, okay, that money still comes from somewhere, that is, the taxpayer. So it's like you're using people's own money to provide a rebate on bills because they're actually going up, not going down. And when you tell people that their electricity prices will go down, most people, I think, would interpret that as simply the numbers on your electricity bill. You're not taking into account, you're not calculating what it's going to be like if the government subsidizes it or gives you a concession or whatever. You're simply just going by, okay, has my electricity bill gone up or down? And putting it that simply, obviously, it has gone up. So, that is what convinces people the most, though. It won't be a documentary hosted by Chris Ullman. It's, just pretty hard to convince anyone that it's the cheapest and most reliable form of energy when every time they get a power bill, it goes up. People know that. And it's not going to translate well in the next election. I still definitely think that my prediction now for the next election is that we're going to go into a minority Labor government. It's quite possible Labor will lose the popular vote like they did in 2010, and we end up like Julia Gillard did.
Yeah.
The only difference, though, now is that Labor would be likely to go into an alliance with the Teals, or some of the Teals, and the Greens. And that's like
it would be a big spastic tent.
Yeah, and possibly like Muslim candidates as well. If Fatima Payman's
if they get that desperate, I don't think they can afford to touch them with the hysteria that is associated with them right now.
Yeah, but look, my point is though, is like Labor with a loose alliance of MPs further to the left is a very real possibility. And that's kind of like the one thing that makes me think, maybe you should vote coalition, just so we can avoid that. I'm not saying that though. Okay. Now, AEMO, the power regulator, was actually forced to use emergency powers to instruct some businesses to shut off certain appliances in New South Wales as well. So this wasn't just like the public being asked, hey, can you do us a favor and turn these things off? Some businesses were actually forced to do so. Now, I posted something on Telegram today. I'm just reminded of it, so I'll bring it up. So EMO is also seeking emergency powers to switch off solar in every state amid system collapse. Now, in many states, such as WA, we actually already have this power. Now, this is an interesting one in that they want people to turn off or turn down their solar power panels because you can actually overload the grid. Now,
yep.
We've just been talking about how, blackouts obviously is when the grid runs out of power. But you can also get fluctuations in the other direction that can be, like, say, if you get like a really prolonged heat wave where there's no clouds in the sky and you're getting plenty of UV, you can actually then overload the grid. And the regulator says, well, we want to be able to step in and have the power to just turn them off altogether. So it's, they don't just cause problems in terms of not being able to store or supply enough power. Sometimes they can actually have too much as well. I don't know.
Yes.
Am I getting the basics of that right?
No. Basically, like when you backfeed, just because of the nature of an AC grid, when you backfeed your inverted DC currents / well, really just current at that point. When you invert your DC and put it back into a grid, you're turning the grid into a heating element. So, power of heating is equal to like voltage times resistance squared. So that's why like they transfer the highest voltage and with the lowest resistance. But if you're backfeeding power into your local grid, if it's not being used immediately, by the way, then it's just being used to heat the wires. On an already hot day, when, by the way, resistance increases with heat, just because the atoms get further apart. This is just a self-feeding loop. And this is why you see, fucking tiger tails on your power lines the day thereafter.
Right. Okay. So here's actually a piece of legislation for the environment that did not go through, and various people are being blamed for it. But this was, what were they? Oh, they had like some special name for this. I forget what it is. But anyway, Tanya Plibersek, who's the environment minister, she was proposing to have a new environmental regulator in Australia. It was basically going to be a copy of the EPA in America, where you have like an environment czar that can unilaterally stop projects. And, this is something separate from like getting through the green tape of an energy project like a mine or offshore gas or whatever it is. This is stuff that, say, could threaten endangered species or, some insect that no one has heard of or old growth forest, whatever it might be. Of course, the Greens wanted to take this a lot further. But funnily enough, two people from the left side of politics are being blamed for why this did not go through. And that is Fatima Payman, talking about her again, but also WA's Premier Roger Cook. So, according to the ABC here, Fatima Payman provided an oh shit moment for Labor during the negotiations over this bill. The reason it was referred to as such is because this was actually a bill Labor thought they had in the bag. As I said, the Greens supported it, so naturally you'd imagine that would mean they could get it through the Senate. Well, in the end, there were talks between Fatima Payman, Adam Bandt, Sarah Hanson-Young, both from the Greens, and also Senator David Pocock, the Teal in the Senate. And they ended up opposing this. Now, the other person, as I said, who opposed all of this was Roger Cook, our Premier. Roger Cook is facing an enormous amount of pressure from farmers here, especially after we axed those Aboriginal cultural heritage laws that just placed an enormous burden on farmers when, even if they just wanted to make the most...
That would have killed the wheat belt here, like straight up within about 8 months, killed it.
Yes. And, Roger Cook, I think, got a real taste of actually what the farming lobby is like here in WA. They've actually still got some balls, in other words. So he knows that. And he knew that these new laws, with like a new environment czar, effectively, was really going to hamper farming here in WA. So Roger Cook is said to have had a private phone call with Anthony Albanese where he basically pleaded with him to have this taken off. So in the end, this bill did not actually go to the House. So, it's debatable as to whether or not Fatima Payman was maybe the one who negotiated with other senators to kill this deal. It might have actually been Anthony Albanese doing a favour to Roger Cook, especially considering we've got an election due in March, only, 4 months away. So it's definitely not a vote winner to upset farmers here in WA. And, we're such a big state and we've got so many communities up in like the northwest and everything, a lot of which just, completely feed off agriculture. We've, over the years, of course, continued to disempower those people. But nonetheless, we have a certain kind of romanticization of them, those salt of the earth type people. Okay. Oh, God, yeah. Here's another one from the ABC. Farmers for Climate Action. Yes, that is an actual body.
Oh, God.
There's somebody, think tank.
What big agro fucking think tank is fucking funding this bullshit?
Of course, yeah. No, the idea, I mean, when you say farmers, I mean, everyone just thinks of like an independent farmer who, like, his farm is where his house is, and he just sells his own produce. That's what most people think of like a farmer. But no, this is like, these are big agricultural companies who own just like hundreds of hectares of land, and they still refer to themselves as farmers. Like IGA calling themselves independent grocers, that kind of thing. But anyway, look, this is like, I just, right on the outset, and no, I haven't dug into this, but I know this has to be bullshit. They said that according to their own survey, 70% of people who live on agricultural land that are in the proximity of green energy power transmission projects. So, for example, the interconnector that's there, Victoria to New South Wales, that transmission line. They're saying 70% of these people are in favour of those projects. Have you seen the size of those protests of people who travel all the way from regional Victoria and New South Wales to Parliament House just to protest this stuff? And also the fact,
I'm pretty sure if I went back to my extended family who are obviously dairy belt farmers and told them that I was in favor of any of this kind of stuff, they would lynch me and then bury my body in an inconspicuous place and part of the family property.
Yeah. So look, dare I say that a sizable chunk of this survey would have actually been from big agro business. They obviously they don't care if they've got a massive transition line going through. It's not like it's going to spoil their view or anything like that. They're there simply to make money, to grow and sell produce, and they don't worry about things like whether or not the skyline is made ugly or if it interferes with where you live, because they don't live there. So they don't care. But of course, it's supposed to look like, oh, those farmers who don't like this, or those country bumpkins from bumfuck nowhere who don't like this, they're just a vocal minority. They're just the loud ones who we pay too much of attention to. And if you just look at the surveys, you'll find, oh no, the majority of people actually support it all. No, I just don't believe them.
No. I do not at all, because the first thing they'll come after, what do you think a farm runs on? Runs on water, first off.
Yeah.
Diesel. What do you think the first thing they fucking go after for emissions charges is for? It's diesel. They go after diesel first.
Right. And what is Big Agri using then?
Diesel, but they're very happy to divest. Also subsidize, incredibly subsidized irrigation. Sometimes they bribe entire governments to reroute rivers to allow them like just gravity-fed irrigation.
Yeah, but I mean, these companies are also the types that have a huge amount of shares in green energy anyway. So, and they started buying those shares years back, like Fortescue.
Again, they're perfectly happy to divest.
Okay, so moving on to other matters on the environment, the Climate Change Authority's annual progress report has been released, and it revealed that emissions increased in transport in the financial year 2023 to 24 and flatlined in the electricity sector, which accounts for more than 1/3 of the country's emissions. So that means that emissions fell by a modest 3 million tonnes last year, which is about 1/5 of the pace required to meet the federal government's target of a 43% reduction in emissions by 2030. So in other words, the Climate Change Authority's annual progress report found that Labor is not on track by by a big way to actually getting to this ambitious cut of 43%, which is basically only 5 years away now. Yeah, I'd agree, but holy shit, this only encourages them to go in that other direction. Now, funnily enough, though, Chris Bowen said that Australia is completely on track to meet those 2030 emissions targets. So he presented to Parliament the latest annual official scorecard, but this came from the Department of Climate Change and Energy. So in other words, his own department was the ones who came up with this. They operate separately from the Climate Change Authority. Now, according to them, the decisions that have been made by the current government over the past year will mean that emissions will fall by 42.6% by 2030. So that is only 0.4% off the official target. So according to Bowen, that's it. We're only off by 0.4%. Yet at the same time, this report, that is an independent report from outside of his department, shows actually no, we're not on track. Now, yeah, I would agree with the former. We're not on track, but that's a good thing. And, this is just perfect intellectual ammo, if you want to call it that, for the Greens to be able to say, no, we're actually not taking enough action on climate change and we need to turbocharge all of this. And by the way, talking about like farmers and people who live in the bush who don't like the transmission lines and such, one of the ways the Greens say we can roll out green energy faster is to just ignore those people. So when it comes to, holding community events where they're consulted over what they think about these projects, the Greens effectively say, no, just we need to streamline it so we can just scrap that consultation process. God. So we just don't listen to the country bumpkins at all, and we just build.
Finian, I'm terrified for the future. I'm terrified that these country bumpkins will learn what happens when Mylar balloons contact power lines. I'll figure out what happens when you mix copper oxide and aluminum powder. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of this. This is exactly what I don't want to happen.
I'm assuming you didn't learn the balloons thing from Breaking Bad. I don't know if you ever watched that show. But
I've got a degree in applied science, man.
Yeah, yeah. You see, that's where I learned it from. There's a scene where, like, Mike, the hitman, lets these balloons go into a power line and shuts off the power. At least I learned it somewhere.
But God, I hope that never happens. It's so terrifying.
Okay, now for one last piece of climate news, and this is, believe it or not, a little bit of good news. So the new LNP government recently elected in Queensland is actually going to spend over $1 billion on the maintenance of coal-fired power stations in Queensland. How about that? So they did describe these plants as reliable and affordable and as necessary going forward. Now, remember, the Queensland LNP government is just much like any other Liberal government, where they're still all for a transition towards renewable energy and getting off coal and gas. The difference is simply that they want to do it a little slower. So, look, if you want to call that a bit of good news, then, maybe. If you watch that documentary I was talking about, they go through like all of the coal fire stations that we have just demolished. We have just absolutely leveled in Australia, and how like they are actually designed by 2050 for there to be none left at all. That's part of how you get to net zero by 2050. You literally do not have any such thing as a coal-fired power station. So even if that's only, a meager $1 billion, it will at least keep, or I should say, stop the rate of power prices from going up by a little bit. Okay. So, moving on to Aboriginal news, and we're going to stay in Queensland. They've just rushed through laws that will axe Queensland's truth-telling inquiry.
Thank God.
So last week we covered how this, like as a bureaucratic body, they were continuing to, do whatever the hell it is they do when it comes to this process of shaming white men into confessing to crimes that they didn't actually commit. So they were basically thumbing their nose at the new LNP government and said, no, we're going to keep going. Well, that has forced the government to rush through legislation, shutting them down and cutting their funding. So great. And again, I know I've said it before, but I must remind people, remember, the LNP supported truth-telling previously, and they only opposed it when they saw the results of the Voice to Parliament referendum. They're like, wow, this stuff is actually really unpopular. Maybe we should oppose it. So yeah, that's gone. They have also, I believe by now they would have gotten through their adult crime, adult time policy, which, kind of says, it speaks for itself. If you're involved in, say, like stabbing or something like that, well, you should get a very lengthy jail period for that. And it can carry on until you're out of life. And you should be sent, once you turn 18, to an adult prison. I've always found it amazing how, like, sometimes you get 20-year-olds in juvenile detention. You know why? Because they got a sentence as a juvenile that carried on into their adult years.
Yeah.
And because of serving a juvenile sentence, they just continue to serve it in the juvenile detention center rather than go to the prison. These laws were designed to crack down on all of that. This went a little further than what they had previously been supporting, and that was simply a return to the laws under the Campbell-Newman government. And that was just stuff like making it illegal for children or juveniles to skip bail. Wow, what a draconian thing. Like, that forced everyone to kind of think, what, hold on.
Oh God, we're going to force people to
and get away with it?
Obey the law?
Yeah, but after you had all those bloody stabbings, like that Sudanese piece of filth who killed the grandmother, stabbed her to death. Again, this forced the LNP to say, maybe, tough law and order policies are a vote winner. It's a shame that we have to endure tragic incidents like that for our politicians to listen, but at least we got somewhere. Okay, now, the Voice to Parliament in South Australia, the only one that's actually operating, they had their first address to State Parliament the other night. So even though, we covered, I think last week, how they had a raft of resignations and a lot of kind of internal squabbling and that going on, they want to remind us that in the 8 months since the members were elected, they've had 18 local meetings, 3 state meetings, met with cabinet ministers, and with agency CEOs. So they're just reminding us that they are actually getting work done, and apparently are in consultation with the sitting Labor government in South Australia, advising on Indigenous policy. We don't really know what kind of Indigenous policy, or even if the Parliament is going to introduce any bills that are a result of this advice that we're getting from the Voice, but we'll see. They're assuring us that, business is carrying on and they're fulfilling their functions, even if there is a bit of internal division. Oh, so finally on A News, you hear about how they banned even more rock climbing. So this is
boy.
Mount, is it Arapiles? Oh man, I'm sorry if I'm probably saying that wrong. This is in rural Victoria, right? And this is a part where they said a lot of professionals are incentivized to work there, such as psychologists and doctors. And these are people who really like doing things like rock climbing and other outdoor activities. It's also a big tourist draw card. In other words, the only reason why many people visit these areas of Victoria is so they can go rock climbing. Well, many of these sites now, you're not allowed because Aboriginals say that you're going to disturb ancient spirits. And I'm not talking about methylated spirits.
I want to obliterate the Aboriginal race.
Yeah.
What in the fuck is wrong with these people? And by the way, how many weeks / months / fucking end of this financial year so a deal can be finalized? Are they just going to start charging people for it? Because, by the way, even though EM did an illegal march, and a rightful one, by the way, because this is our fucking land, not theirs anymore. They exist by our grace. They charge for fucking, trips up to the top of Mount Morning. They charge for these places. They commodify them because it's not about spirituality. Because every single company, every single institution that deals with these fucking subhuman filth knows that it's just a matter of money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because, when they say that it's Aborigines who are opposing the climbing on these rocks here, it's actually these Aboriginal corporations, as they're called, which are basically lobby groups who actually they tend to like negotiating more with resources companies than they do with government. It's blatant rent seeking where they get a slice of the pie. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing here. They eventually just turn it into their own private land and charge a fee for it. I believe they actually do that to an extent at Ayers Rock, don't they?
Yes, they do, and also it won't be. This won't be novel to the American audience. The American audience will know about the charges and bullshittery that goes on Indian reservations in America. It's exactly the same thing that happens over here.
Yeah, except our blackfellas are too dumb to run casinos. That's about it.
Yes, but it's also just as tribally influenced.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the economy, and we've got a pretty bad scorecard here for the Albanese government. So, um, I keep naming these studies and I never say where they come from. And I haven't written them in my prep. Anyway, there was a report that was released this was done by several economists. And they were looking at, I'm glad they did this, GDP per capita. So, in other words, are people's living standards actually rising or falling in Australia? And this is how we should really measure GDP. Not like the total of it, but on a per capita basis where you take population into account. Are our conditions actually going up or down? And this report found that overwhelmingly it is going down. In fact, it has been going down pretty much the entire time. It found the Albanese government is presiding over the longest household recession, with GDP per capita going backwards for the past 6 quarters. And that is in a trend that economists predict is likely to continue. So it says, while GDP per capita dipped lower during the past 4 technical recessions, the length of the current so-called household recession has not been experienced during any other downturn of the past half century. So this is just one of the things where, Albo is getting very nervous about being a one-term prime minister. Because again, people don't really need to be shown these numbers. They simply just need to consider their own lot. Are they able to afford things as well as they could a few years ago? What are their power bills like? What's their rent like? What is their mortgage payment like? Is it better or worse than a few years ago? And pretty much everyone is finding that it's worse. So, I'm glad we've got some official data on that. But yeah, I think we all know. But not to say Peter Dutton's going to make it any better. I mean, the one thing that could make it better, and that is cutting the amount of immigrants here. We need to do that for a whole range of reasons. But certainly when it comes to the cost of living, it's what's impacting it the most. And there Peter Dutton is opposing a cap on student visas. So how is he going to get it under control? So let's go into housing. And we got some more figures for you in terms of house
We actually have a table.
All right. Yeah, I actually snipped a table into the prep today. Now, you want to have a guess
Haben wir
as
an
to
Tische.
the city in Australia that is predicted to undergo the biggest rise in house prices for 2025? You might think it's Melbourne, you might think it's Sydney. It's not. It is actually Perth. So, according to this forecast, here I actually know who it was. This was SQM Research, and they had their latest boom and bust report. So they're predicting that in 2025, property prices in Perth are going to increase by between 14 to 19%. That is massive. Only 1 year
Yep.
see them rise that much. That is fucking huge. So that's followed by Brisbane, 9 to 14%, Darwin 5 to 8%, Melbourne -5 to -1%. So there you go. You might actually get some housing relief over in Melbourne. And in Sydney, it's also predicted between -5 and -1%. Elsewhere, Adelaide, 8 to 13% increase. Hobart, -3 to -2% decrease. Canberra, -6 to -2% decrease. And then the average for a capital city is between 1 and 4% increase. That seems a little low to me, especially given how high Perth is. But yeah, fuck, man, look, this breaks my heart looking at this, I'm constantly ranting about how, Perth previously rejected. Like pretty much all of our history, we rejected high density living. Now we are just bending over backwards, and it's just being approved left, right, and centre. These
It's going to become
massively.
inevitability.
Hmm?
It's going to become inevitable.
Yeah. And I'm
It
just
didn't need
seeing
to be
that
this way. Not at all.
apartment projects are just going up everywhere. And housing lots, like houses that say get sold, then the house is demolished so that they can then subdivide it. Uh, you know, Basically what used to be someone's backyard turns into another property and you access it through the same driveway. Because that shit's happening all the time here in Perth. So it doesn't surprise me at all that we would be the ones experiencing these massive increases. We also have the tightest rental market in the country. Not a surprise, considering so many immigrants now are saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't go to Melbourne or Sydney because it's already so fucking big, so already so packed. I should go one of those smaller cities like Perth. And then you just create the exact same problem here. And it's happening around me all the time. It infuriates me. Okay, so in Brisbane, the Brisbane City Council apparently has failed to back up their claims that homelessness is increasing rates of violence and disorder in the capital city. Now, this is because they've been pressuring police to come in and basically clean up like all of these tent cities that have grown. I mean, they exist everywhere, but they're said to be particularly bothersome in Brisbane. And there's a lot of unauthorized, dangerous fires that are being lit. And this, in part, is Brisbane City Council is telling us that there isn't enough publicly accessible barbecues, like free barbecues that you can use. So I guess, yeah, they're often used by homeless people. So we don't even have like the basic facilities like that to keep homeless people who live in tents and that pacified. And yeah, I'm seeing more and more like sophisticated bums, if you want to call them that. So by that I don't mean that guy you see with the sleeping bag who sleeps outside of McDonald's or something. I mean people who actually like pitch tents, or they steal trolleys, or they steal like rundown couches
Create
and
structures.
yeah, and they create like their own like little like improvised shelter. I'm seeing more and more of that in Perth. Like, and it used to be a case where like if one of those went up, the police would pretty much clear them out almost instantly. Now there's just like so many of them that it's considered cruel to do that.
Yeah,
So
no, the one in Fremantle is now permanent. There's
right,
one
yeah,
off
oh yeah, I
the
forgot about that one.
highway
Yeah, that's
exit.
good.
Yes. Yeah, it used to be cleared out seasonally, but now it's just permanent. And
Yeah,
the one off the
there's
Fleet
just too many of
Highway
them.
exits north of the river is just now permanent. There's also a handful in East Perth that are now permanent. Their general presence outside of the Wacker building is now permanent, and Wacker has actually even complained about it. Or Wapper has complained about it because their students are being harassed.
You mean what?
Wapper, yeah, sorry.
Wapper. I've never heard it pronounced like that.
Oh, whatever the fuck. It's a bunch of artist fucking shits. Anyway, so and also now the ECU building, even though it's now hasn't opened, is now petitioning students for like extra fees to go to that building because it's going to face high security risks, so therefore higher costs.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed them popping up like under like overpasses, like bridges and that kind of thing. They like setting up little tents and stuff under there. Uh, and yeah, I'm noticing now that they stay there. Used to be like I'd notice them in the city go up, and then a week later they'd be gone. Now they're just staying there. It's yeah, we're looking more like those third world elements that you see within the ruins of America. we're getting all of that stuff here.
Yeah.
Here's something else. Again, third world conditions. There's a new phenomenon of hot bedding in Australia. So this is where you share the same bed in overcrowded rooms. Okay. So previously, it was like multiple people in a share house. Then it became about actually having multiple beds per bedroom, and now it is multiple people per bed. That's how bad it's getting. So this one house that the ABC profiled, this was a 2-bedroom flat that had 20 people living in it. Now, sure, that's an edge case example, but why the hell do we even have one of those in Australia? Yeah, they do have stuff like this in the Philippines, but we never fucking had anything like this here. And unfortunately, for too many people, it's becoming the norm. All right.
Okay, wasn't that place like God? Before I was even a guest on the show, you covered that that one fucking like little sweatshop down south in like
Oh yeah.
past Jandakot with like fucking 18 Malaysians to a 4-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, I think that was a fruit picking outfit where they were doing that. And like when they took all the deductions, for accommodation and that kind of thing, they were left with something like $50.
Yeah.
Like at the end of it. It was getting really bad. And that was something where you had the agri company working with the labour hire group and the migration agents. They're like always the three bodies, the axis of evil involved in those kind of things.
Yeah.
All right. So just one story on industrial relations. So again, talking about the Queensland government, we mentioned, I think last week, that they've ripped up an agreement that was with the CFMEU and the ETU, the Electrical Trades Union. This is for basically to have EBAs, enterprise bargaining agreements on various government projects, so large-scale projects. And that meant that you had the union sweeteners in it, such as when it goes over a certain temperature, you get sent home, or at least you sit it out until the temperature drops back down. So there was a huge protest by the CFMEU and the ETU over this, and they were talking about how there have been workers who have literally died of the heat on construction sites. And yeah, that's true. You can actually be worked to death in very hot conditions. So look, you can argue that maybe some of the things in the types of EBAs that the CFMEU and the ETU want you to sign maybe are a little bit over the top. You look at like some of the allowances that they get, in other words, the payments on top of their wages. You kind of think, what the hell is that? I've never even heard of this allowance before. But no, basic things like this, though, the fact that you shouldn't be forced into highly labour-intensive work in the searing heat, that's definitely fair enough, And, it's one thing to say throw out a union EBA, but it's another thing just to throw out, very basic regulations like that. And this is not going to prove to be popular at all. Screwing workers, even if sometimes screwing the ETU and the CFMEU might be popular, screwing workers in that regard where you have them dying on site, that's not exactly a vote winner. All right.
No.
Quick story on superannuation. We mentioned last week that Wayne Swan refused to front the Senate Economics Committee. Well, after sustained media pressure, he has now actually appeared. I think he did via a video link. So some other high-profile woman, I think it was, from CBUS, was grilled in Senate estimates. but now Swanny, who's the chair of CBUS, he appeared. He said that of the backlog of entitlements that were there to be paid out to people like grieving widows, whose husbands might have been killed in a workplace accident.
Recently? That they had
Those,
to go to the fucking media for?
yeah, well, the money that CBUS owed those families was being delayed. Now, Swanny has said that 80% of that backlog has now been cleared. Obviously debatable as to whether or not that is true, but that's what Swanny told Senate estimates. And he also repeated an apology that he previously gave in a speech to CBUS stakeholders. So he did apologise unreservedly to those families and individuals who were affected by that. And yeah, he's saying that they're making every effort now to get those payments through. All right. A long time since we've mentioned the Bali 9. It's actually the Bali 5 now. So one of them, I believe, was released. One of them died of cancer in jail, and two of them were executed. Australian citizens, but you'd hardly call them Australian. Andrew Chan was one of them, and the other guy was called, God, I can't remember. Sumamarachan or something.
Mix.
What?
Assorted Islamo race.
Well, they both had Aussie accents, which I find sad, It's like, oh, damn, you guys, you grew up here, you were acculturated here to an extent, but you still don't belong here. So, look, Indonesia executing you. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad or good, but it wasn't an execution of Australians. I don't think that was. Anyway, there is talk about bringing the remaining 5 back to Australia. Now, I know that some of them are on life sentences. And remember, when you have a life sentence in Indonesia, that actually means life. It doesn't mean 8 years like it does in Australia. Fun fact, the average amount of time spent in jail for murder in Western Australia is 8 years. And that usually comes as a result of a life sentence. But, they then go in front of a parole hearing and they get let out, which is ridiculous if you think about it. So the question now is to, how will we actually, how long will we incarcerate them for if we bring them to Australian prisons? Because most people, see this as basically a way of releasing them. The first step is bring them to Australia.
Yeah.
Once they're under Australian jurisdiction, they can go to the parole board and, ask to be let go. Obviously, if we were to do something like that, the Indonesians would consider that to be a big slap in the face and to be undermining their own criminal justice system, which is a fair point. It is. So I think we did something very similar for Schapelle Corby. Now, she had a 20-year sentence, of course, but I think once everything was said and done, she actually served very close to 20 years. I think it was 15 or so, whether that was in Bali or in Australia, under various conditions.
There's also the difference.
Security classifications. But she did actually serve at least 10 years in jail.
Again, how many fucking Indonesian civilians did fucking Corby actually fucking kill at the end of the day? We're talking about people who blew up civilians in that country.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean the sentences that were given to the Bali bombers? How they didn't compare?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They don't compare. She served all of her sentence, but the deaths are unforgivable. Being caught with a boogie board full of fucking snuff is one thing.
Yeah. And I mean, look, by the way, I know this isn't really anything to do with it, but I do think Corby was guilty.
Oh
Like
yeah,
the idea of
absolutely.
baggage handlers hiding fucking marijuana in boogie board bags, and also the fact that that was the fifth time Chappelle Corby had been to Bali in 12 months. You know, who the fuck goes to Bali that many times in such a short length of time? I'm sorry, I have a hard time believing it's always for a holiday. But yeah, no, I mean that's a separate discussion though. I mean the fact that they're so incredibly harsh on drug dealers, whereas yeah, like they seem to turn almost a blind eye to Islamic terrorism and other crimes too. Or like people also talk about how you can get like some milkshake in Bali that gets you high, and that's perfectly legal. I know I haven't been to Bali since I was a young kid, but I've heard that, trotted out how like, certain things are like perfectly acceptable. But if the cops find you with just like a little bit of weed or one ecstasy tablet or something, that can actually mean a few months or even a few years in jail, which, yeah, it does seem like overkill to me. But anyway, we'll see what happens with that. Um, oh, yeah, just quickly, I think this was a story we forgot to cover last week how the International Criminal Court has given out an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, and it also included arrest warrants for members of Hamas. But nonetheless, Penny Wong was asked in the Senate whether or not Australia would honour the arrest warrant, because remember, we're a signatory to the ICC, America is not. So that means, according to our agreement with the ICC, if Benjamin Netanyahu were to set foot in Australia, he would be arrested by us. That is part of how international law works. And certainly, if you want to apply international law, you've got to be willing to actually do something like that, like arrest someone if there is a warrant out on them. And anyway, this is what Penny Wong said. Unlike you, we actually believe that adherence to international law is a matter of principle, and it is in Australia's interests. So, while she did not directly answer the question, that sounds to me like she's saying yes, Australia would arrest BB should he fly here. So, how
Well,
about that?
no.
Look, maybe not, but man, I would just love to see what would happen. Like, if he were to, maybe he'd think he could call Australia's bluff and try flying here. He won't, I know, but it would be such a great, like, spectacle to withhold.
Yeah, positive or negative, arrest or not. Like, yeah, it would be great to see like X, Y, and Z happen when it comes to him, and figure out exactly how much of this international law actually means anything. But
Yeah,
we both know what's happening here.
I know. All right, well, let's move on to state politics. So here in WA, our leader of the opposition is Libby Mettam, who's of the Liberal Party. Our leader of the opposition previously was actually from the National Party, but that's another story. Anyway, she has survived what was sort of a behind the scenes leadership challenge. There was no official contender for the role, but here's what they wanted to do. There was a plan. We've gone over this before, or there is an idea. I'll simply say, maybe not a plan, to make Basil Zemplis, who is a celebrity of sorts here in WA. You probably haven't heard of him over east. To make him the campaign leader of the Liberal Party. So what does that mean? That means that he actually runs as leader of the Liberal Party outside of Parliament, because he's not a member of Parliament. I guarantee he will be in come the next election, which will be after March or March next year. I think rumours are that he's going to run in the seat of Churchlands, which is a blue ribbon safe Liberal seat, and then he'll be automatically catapulted into the leadership role because he is popular as Lord Mayor, and internal Liberal Party polling has shown that he is very popular and that he is even more popular than the current leader, Libby Mettam. Now, that is precisely why this vote took place. So, Cam Sinclair, this is the man who ran Basil Zemplis's campaign to become Perth Lord Mayor. He has admitted that he ran internal Liberal Party polling that showed that Basil Zemplis was indeed more popular than Libby Mettam. Now, unfortunately, this led members of the Liberal Party to say, hey, maybe we should consider this and consider running Basil outside the Parliament in the next election. So, in the end, though, this vote was defeated, and there was no one actually formally challenging for the Liberal leadership either. So that means that Libby Mettam is secure in her job in the remaining, 4 months that we have till the next election. So Cam Sinclair has actually publicly apologised for this. He said that internal polling was not meant to be made public. It was simply there as a way to promote the guy he works for, that is Basil Zemplis. Now, I got to say this was just really stupid tactically of the Liberal Party, because the next election, the Liberal Party are guaranteed to lose it. And the reason for that is very simple. Both the Nationals and the Liberals won collectively 6 seats in the last election. It was about as close to a flawless victory for Labor as you can get. It was an absolute crushing defeat for the coalition. And when that happens, you're basically guaranteed 2 terms out of office. Okay? So you can just write off the next election. So why on earth would you use your best talent, that is Basil Zemplis, during an election that you're guaranteed to lose? It's really stupid. You basically have a seat warmer, in this case Libby Mettam, who will go in and perhaps lead the Liberal Party to win back a few of the seats that they lost. For example, the seat of Churchlands, which despite being a safe Liberal seat is actually currently held by Labor. So you put them back into a position where you win back those seats, and you're back into a position where you can actually win the next election. And that is when you bring out the big guns and actually run a leader who is popular. So, yeah, that's obviously what's going to happen now. Basil will be catapulted into the leadership. And when we have our next election in 2029, that's likely where Basil Zemplis, hard to believe, will become the Premier of WA.
Fuck.
I mean, yeah, because I'm not a sports guy, I'm not, obviously I know who he is. I kind of know.
He has been the most fucking fucking med shit fucking actual gamel fucking person when it comes to politics.
He has an enormous Roman nose, doesn't he?
I know he does. Jesus Christ. We're nordicists up in this bitch. We ain't here for fucking betrayers.
The thing is, though, he's very often been mocked for the large nose. Like, it's not considered to be racist towards meds or something. He's been, whenever they have a cartoon of him, done by the West Australian or whatever, he's always drawn with a massive... He
looks like an anti-Semitic caricature.
Okay.
Unironically.
Oh, here's a funny story. So talking about the West Australian Labor Party, this is probably someone who even WA listeners has probably forgotten about this guy. His name is Barry Urban. So he won a seat just as a backbencher, as an MP back in 2017. And it actually turned out that he lied about a military career and a university education. Because basically he didn't have a military career and he didn't even have a degree. Yet he had on the public record that he had a Bachelor of Arts or something. and it turned out he didn't. Now, this not only meant that he had to leave Parliament, but he actually went to jail because the way he misled Parliament and therefore the public was actually seen as so egregious by the court that it warranted a jail sentence. So to say that this guy is a disgraced former member of Parliament is a bit of an understatement, actually. Anyway, this guy is actually in a critical condition in hospital right now. You want to know why? Because someone from Seville Grove king hit him right in the face. And Seville Grove, Seville Grove, if you don't know, is adjacent to Armidale in Western Australia. Armidale is the meth capital of Australia. They have found
I was going to say the meth nurse day, buddy.
Yeah. They found more
City of Armidale, meth till death, baby.
Number one is Armidale, and number two is also
Mandurah.
A suburb of Perth. What?
Mandurah, isn't it?
Yes, Mandurah. Mandurah is number two. Even though
they're meth nose days, baby.
Yeah. So anyway, since this guy left Parliament, he was running a motor vehicle repair place, mechanics, car repair type thing. And he apparently got into a verbal altercation with this man from Seville Grove. He punched him in the head, and then his head hit the floor, which has caused enormous head trauma. And he apparently could die because the brain injuries were so severe. So, sorry to hear about that, Barry. Okay, in Victoria, long-serving Nationals leader, Peter Walsh, he's going to be stepping down as leader soon. 70 years old, he's been in Parliament since 2002, and he's actually been leading the National Party for close to 10 years. And, unlike the Liberal Party, his leadership is actually considered to be pretty stable. And, say, unlike the Nationals over in New South Wales, where it's anything but.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're actually, for a change, they're seeing what you could call a popular leader stepping down. All right, let's just talk a little bit about the Prahran, I hope I'm saying that right, by-election in Victoria. We mentioned last week that this is triggered by the resignation of Greens MP Sam Hibbins. So we mentioned that this was because of sexual misconduct accusations levelled against him by a Greens staffer. That person has since been publicly identified. It is a woman, and she is talking to the media about it. And she said that she tried to kiss him on more than one occasion. So, yeah. Look, if you go to kiss a girl, though, and she rejects you, and you only do that once,
just stop.
That's not sexual harassment or misconduct. I can't call it such. Because, how else are you supposed to actually initiate something, someone's got to make that first move. And any girl will tell you she's not going to be the one to make the first move. The guy is expected to do that. So I don't know if this is, a bit of overkill. And yes, this might mean I'm actually defending a Greens member here. But look, the immorality comes to the fact that simply this guy is actually a married man with kids. Okay, so that does make the behaviour inappropriate, we'll say, or immoral. But I don't know if I would call trying to kiss a girl sexual assault or sexual misconduct. I'm sorry, but that seems like a bit of a stretch to me. Anyway, if you go by the numbers here, this is turning out to be a three-way race between Labor, Liberal and the Greens. If you go by the primary vote in 2022, Labor were on 26.6%, Liberals were on 31.1%, and the Greens were on 36.4. So as you can see, that is almost a third, a third, a third. So naturally, that means all three parties are really gearing up here and spending a lot of money on that campaign. In the federal parliament, the Libs are losing Simon Birmingham. So he's said to be the most senior moderate in the current parliament. He is the leader of the Liberals in the Senate, so he's the counterpart of Penny Wong. And he is also Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, which is also opposite Penny Wong. Now, they're saying over at the ABC that this is like a further hollowing out of the moderate faction in the Liberal Party. Look, I would say to them, don't worry, because even so-called hardline conservatives like Peter Dutton are not really hardline conservatives. You might just find like small differences on energy policy, and that's about it, because the moderates' energy policy might look a little bit more like the Greens, and they might just have a problem with nuclear power, unlike Dutton. That's about it. But don't worry, you've still got plenty of moderates, okay? Just because you don't have a leader in the Senate anymore doesn't mean you don't have plenty of moderates left. Have you heard of musical therapy, Nolsey?
No, I have not. Would you like to enlighten me?
Well, so this is a fairly recent phenomena, and I actually found out about this through a girl I used to work with who was pursuing a career she was going for a career change and pursuing a career in musical therapy. And it is much like, I guess the name would suggest. You actually do use music for therapeutic purposes. And she was actually telling me about how there's a whole heap of like studies on this stuff now that involves activation of certain parts of the brain and all this kind of thing. But it can actually also just simply be there as just, playing, writing, performing, recording music simply because you enjoy it as a hobby. And anyway, the reason I mention this is because this is actually one of the services that's doled out on the NDIS. So, we always hear about these ridiculous services that the NDIS performs. And yeah, that does include things like crystal healing, but it also involves musical therapy. So some people who are deemed unfit for work, but, music is a hobby of theirs, like playing guitar or something like that, they can actually have like a music teacher sent to their house to just do music with them. It might not even be like, the type of work that a musical therapist would do. It's just simply playing music. So Bill Shorten is saying that the way these are funded through the NDIS is set to change. Now, by that, he can only mean that it's going to be cut because, some of it is just taking the piss. The amount of money that we're paying, I really don't think that the taxpayer should have to pay for, some disabled guy getting guitar lessons, for example. I just don't see that as a reasonable function of the disability sector, for money to be spent on. Considering they're already getting a disability payment and a range of other services as well. They don't need to have like guitar lessons thrown on top of that. So that is a reform I'd say is probably needed. Okay. I was supposed to write public sector on this next story for the topic. The Australian are relishing some figures that have just come out. This is concerning the size of the Australian public sector under the Albanese government. So apparently, since Albo took over, there has been a surge of the public sector by 16.4%. So that is rising from a workforce of 26,153 to, no, that can't be right, to 185,000. They must be missing a digit there. Anyway, the rise is by 16.4%, which I guess is, yeah, quite big because that doesn't sound like it's in line with population growth. And so, yeah, the Australian were basically kvetching about how that's costing taxpayers so much more to fund those dirty white-collar bureaucrats that everyone hates paying.
All right.
All right, let's just end with two quick stories here. Ever heard of genetic discrimination, Nosy?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so
I'm in the
for
health
those who
industry,
don't
my
know,
dude.
well, this specific type of genetic discrimination, this is a practice that insurance companies take part in. So we all know that, you know, if you sign up for life insurance or health insurance or whatever, those companies want to know if you have a pre-existing condition. You know, did you have a heart attack or something
Yeah.
before? Did you have some kind of disease or something? Well, some of them want to take it that step further, and they want you to actually provide like a blood sample so that they can test your DNA to see if you have a genetic predisposition to, well, anything that could cost them money, anything that could say cut your life short or bring you down with
Yeah.
some illness that makes you unable to work, anything that, you know, could mean an insurance payout. So the government is moving to legislate against this because they refer to that as genetic discrimination, and they say that that should just simply be illegal. Now, you think about it,
Unfortunately,
this kind of stuff.
it's correct. It's correct. It's true. Like like yeah, if you got a certain genes, yeah, you could like more disposed to bowel cancer, like lymphoma cancer, etc. Hell, like it's known that brain is matrilineal.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, if you think about it, we actually already outlaw genetic discrimination. For example, insurance companies, I know that they would like to charge, like, say, Aboriginal drivers more money for their car insurance. Why? Because they're more likely to uh, cause accidents. And if you think differently, why is it that if you're a male driver, why is it that suddenly your policy is cheaper when you turn 26? Because you're considered to have gotten out of that, juvenile state of mind where you like taking your engine and pretending you're going to drag race someone at the red lights or something. I remember plenty of dickheads used to do that.
Your young male teenage hyper impulsive years.
Yeah, yeah. So naturally, insurance companies think, well, you know, you're more likely to do something stupid while you're driving. And they're right. So they have been allowed to discriminate in terms of sex and age, but they're not allowed to discriminate in terms of race, even though it would mean something for their bottom line, you know, if they could say charge whites less than Aborigines. You were going to say?
No, I was going to say, yes, that's exactly the case. Like, you could even bring that down to the finite, like, intra-racial condition, because you could probably find genes that are related to high impulsivity within inside a race. Again, like everything boils back to eugenics if you want to make things hyper efficient.
Yeah, and insurance companies are not politically correct enough to ignore that. So, yeah, they want to do that, but yeah. Anyway, this story that I got was saying that, of all of the many legislation that got through with the guillotine motion, this was actually one that didn't. So they promised for a while to pass this, but yeah, that's raising questions as to whether or not maybe the business lobby, the insurance lobby, is playing a role here and convincing the government not to pass such laws. We'll see. Okay, last story is on education and the amount of independent private schools, the amount of students that are enrolled at those schools is actually said to take over Catholic private schools. It's on track to overtake the amount of students enrolled at Catholic private schools. Now, most independent private schools, they're basically just, secular. They're like public schools, but privately funded or partly privately funded.
Mm.
And they've usually just got a better reputation and a better GPA than the other public schools. So this is very unique in Australia because for a long time, sending your kid to a public school wasn't just about ensuring a better quality education for your child. It was also because you wanted them to be indoctrinated into whatever religion your family is. Hence,
Yeah.
Catholic schools. You go to a Catholic school if your family's Catholic, or you go to an Anglican school if your family's Anglican, whatever. Now,
Go to Jewish school if your family's
but now
demonic.
it's actually getting to the pace where normal, independent public schools, their standards are just getting so shit, or it's so hard to find teachers, or there is just so much violence going on that it's being caused by non-white hordes that have flooded into the system, that this is causing white flight, and I'd say to an extent Asian yellow flight as well, because parents are looking on and saying, hey, I had no issues sending my kid to a public school, but holy shit, the standards are so bad there, the teachers are so bad, the classroom sizes are so big because of a shortage of teachers. We've got relief teachers coming in all the time teaching classes who don't know what they're talking about. And not to mention the fact that my son or my daughter is being bullied by some fucking African. Not a surprise that that's causing him to say, all right, I'm going to pull them out. And even though I can't really afford it, I'm going to fork out the money. I'll find it somehow to pay for a private education.
Well, again, it's an American question. What do you mean by good schools?
All of these issues that we saw, where God, I can't remember one of those parody movies. It might have been like Naked Gun or something, where how some public schools in America, they literally have metal detectors.
Yes.
When you go in, that was seen as a joke that couldn't possibly happen in Australia. No, it's being brought here, unfortunately.
Oh, there we go.
They may not be firing weapons, but they're fucking stabbing people.
I was gonna say, is that in Melbourne then?
Huh?
Is that in Melbourne?
Yeah. Sometimes you're getting cases of Muslims getting Jews to kiss their shoes as well.
Oh God, so terrible. Someone informed the ECAJ.
Yeah. But no, man, fuck. Arabs in, for the most part, when they're not disciplined by Islam, they just revert to the laws of the jungle and they become fucking animals, And I've no doubt that they're a big part of the problem too. And I'm not just talking about, bullying Jewish kids. I mean, white kids as well, Go have a look at what happened at Cronulla. That was
Again,
not for no reason.
I'm supposed to think that people within our circle think that Arabs are our friends or Muslims are our friends or Muslims can be anything but, just a tool that is used, without agency against the Jews.
Yeah, I'm just making the point, most of them are sent to public schools because their parents are working class, Very few of them actually go to those Islamic schools. I would rather they did go to those Islamic schools. And I don't accept that, that would further entrench cultural separateness because it's already there. And even if it is a form of separateness or segregation or whatever, that's better, okay? if they live amongst us, I would at least like them to not be bullying white children in public schools. You know, they can just keep all that bullshit in their own space, even if it is in our own country. Some form of separation is better than none. Okay, anyway, on that note, guys, we will leave it there. So thank you for listening to episode 233 of The Racist War. Remember, you can now support us at theracer.biz/donate. And please join us this Wednesday for the very first episode of The Racer Live. Joel Davis should be joining us. He told me he can come on anyway, so hopefully between now and then he's able to keep that commitment. And we'll put out all of the links. We'll be streaming on, I think, just Odyssey and Rumble. So I better make sure I do a test on that because I've never streamed from Rumble before. We will not be streaming from YouTube because, it's
going to end terribly.
Yep, and that could mean my channel is just nuked from YouTube yet again. So I'm not going to take that risk. Hopefully you will join us for that, and we'll see you soon.